Hello! Today I will show you how to make a rig for your snake characters that is relatively simple to make and just as relatively simple to use. This rig is made of 4 key components, for each of which I will show you how to build it, explain why we need it, and go over its limitations that I know of. Before we start, I would just like to clarify that I am by no means an expert. I had a lot of help from some great people on the NSFW Blender Discord, which I'll link along with this video. So, the rig's 4 components, in the order that we'll create them, are the bendy bones, the IK location bones, the pole targets, and the FK rotation bones. So, our first step is going to be converting the tail's deform bones into bendy bones. I believe that these give a much better deformation for something like a rope, or a tentacle, or in our case, a snake. If that all sounds good to you, then we're going to select the armature, go into the Data tab, Viewport Display, and we're going to change Display As from octahedral to B-bone. Now, don't freak out, it'll probably look something like this, but that's an easy fix. Hold down Tab and use your mouse to select Pose Mode. Then, press A to select all bones, and then Ctrl-Alt-S. Now, we can scale the thickness down to something more usable. This doesn't have any bearing on how they function. It's purely for appearances and ease of use. You can also do this for any bones that still need to be thinner, as I'm doing here with the hand and finger bones. Now that we've done that, we can start making our snake tail bendy. For each bone on the tail, we're going to want to select it, go into Bone Properties, Bendy Bones, and increase the segments. I typically do 3. You may want more or less depending on the needs of your rig. Do this for each bone in the tail. Once we complete the whole tail, there is one problem we have to solve before we continue. Select the first tail bone. If you try moving it, you might notice that it doesn't bend itself to align with the pelvis. That's because bendy bones have to be connected in order to actually bend. Unfortunately, we can't connect it to the pelvis since they're pointing in opposite directions. So instead, we're going to create an additional bone that will be hidden, but which will allow the bendy bone to work. First, go back to the Data tab and set the display mode back to octahedral. Then, hold down Tab and select Edit Mode. Select the head of your first tailbone. Hit E to extrude, then Z to constrain it to the global Z axis, and we'll bring it up about as high as the shoulders. Then, select the bone, hit Shift-S, and choose Cursor to Selected. Now, hold down the period key next to the comma, and select 3D Cursor. This will allow us to rotate the bone around the cursor instead of its head. For this next step, I'm going to be rotating the bone on the X-axis, because my character is facing the Y-axis. If your character is facing the X-axis, then you'll want to rotate on the Y-axis. Now, hit R to rotate the bone, then X, and type 180 to flip the bone over. Next, we'll want to parent the first tailbone to the new one we just made. Select the first tailbone, then the new one. Hit Ctrl-P and select Connected. Now, we can set the bones to display as B-bone again. Once you've done that, select the new bone, go into your bendy bones and give it some more segments, just like we did the others. If yours looks twisted like this one, you can fix it by adjusting its roll in Edit Mode, under Bone Properties. You should only have to turn it in increments of 90. I'm adjusting mine until it looks mostly straight, then clicking the number to type in the nearest multiple of 90, which, in my case, is 90. Now, if you try to rotate the first tailbone, it should be bending properly. However, we still have the issue of this massive bone in the middle of our skeleton. There should never be a need to select it, it's just there to make the tail bend properly. So, to keep it from getting in the way, we're going to add it to a hidden collection. Go into Data, Bone Collections. We're going to create a new collection for our new bone. Click on the little plus sign. If you want, you can double-click on the name of the collection to rename it. You can use these arrows to move the collection up and down the list. If you look here next to the eyeball, you'll see a little white dot. When you have a bone selected, that white dot shows you which collections it's in. With the new bone selected, click on our new collection, then click Assign. After that, select the other collection that it's in and click Remove. Now, click on the little eyeball for the new collection, and just like that, the bone is hidden. Congratulations! We've just set up our bendy bones. Next up, the IK location bones. These will allow you to puppeteer the tail by moving them around instead of rotating the tail bones themselves. Before we continue, we should make a new collection for our tail bones. I'm calling mine Tail Deform. Make sure to remove them from their original collection, so that we'll be able to hide them using our new one. With all of the tail bones selected, go into Edit mode. For the first one, make sure that only one end of the bone is selected. You can unselect it using Box Select. Press B. This will allow you to draw a box using your cursor. Using left click will select objects. Using middle mouse button will deselect them. Use the middle mouse button to deselect the top of the first bone. Now, press E to extrude. Then, either X or Y, depending on which axis is aligned with the front of your character. Extrude the bones out to what you feel is an appropriate length. Then press Enter. We have just created what will become our IK location bones. Unfortunately, since they are all connected to the tail deform bones, if we try to select all of them, you can see that the deform bones are selected as well. Because of this, I think it's best to do these next steps for each bone individually. First, create a new collection. I'm calling mine Tail IK. Starting with the first one of the new bones, press Alt-P, then select Clear Parent. Then rename the bone. I'm calling these Tail IK followed by a number. The number should match the tail deform bone that it will control. So, Tail IK 00 for Snake Tail 00, Tail IK 01 for Snake Tail 01, and so on. Then, add the bone to the new Tail IK collection. Repeat these steps for each of the new IK bones. Once you've completed this process, select all of the tail IK bones, then parent them to the root bone. Next, we'll add the IK constraints. Go into Pose mode. Select the first tail bone, then go into the Bone Constraints tab. Click Add Bone Constraint, and select Inverse Kinematics. For target, select the character's armature. For the bone, select the IK bone that corresponds to the tail bone. Then, set chain length to 1. Repeat this for each of the tail deform bones. And that's the IK location bones complete. These alone will allow you to animate the character like never before, but they aren't quite everything that you'll need. One thing that still needs to be accounted for is the twisting of the deform bones. By default, they will inherit the rotation of their parent, the pelvis. While this can be good in some cases, I find that more often than not, this becomes a hassle. Along with location, we need a way to control the rotation of the deform bones that won't be affected by outside influence. For that, we're going to make pole targets. First, make a new collection. I'm calling this one Tail Pole Targets. Then, go into Edit mode. Select just the tail of the IK bones. Then, extrude them out, just like we did for the IK bones. Then, we're going to select all of them. Hit Alt-P and select Disconnect Bone. Then, add them to the collection we just made. After this, rename each bone, and number it according to the deform bone that it will be connected to. I'm going with Tail IK Pole Target for mine. Next, we're going to add them to the IK constraints in Pose mode. Starting at the first bone, add the rig to Pole Target, then the corresponding bone that we just made into Bone. The deform bone shouldn't rotate when you do this, but if it does, you can straighten it by adjusting the pole angle. Do this for each bone in the chain. And that should be it. Personally, I like to hide the pole target collection and just use the IK bones themselves to control twist. But you can also use the pole targets independently if that's easier for you. That just leaves us with one piece missing. While we can already do a lot with what we have, there are some cases where purely relying on IK bones can be a nuisance. FK bones have their drawbacks, but they have their uses too. This final piece of the rig will allow us to have the best of both worlds. First, create a new collection. I'm calling this one Tail FK Controls. Now, we need to be careful with these next few steps. Select all of the deform bones. In edit mode, hit Shift D to duplicate, then escape. Once you've done this, immediately assign the new bones to the new collection, and like always, remove them from any others. Next, so that we can tell them apart from the deform bones, hit Ctrl-Alt-S and then X to scale the bones sideways, then Ctrl-Alt-S again, followed by Y to make them thinner. Now, we can tell them apart from the deform bones. Next, we'll have to go through the bones one by one in pose mode. Starting with the first one, delete the IK constraint, reduce the bendy bone segments to 1, and give it a name and number. I'm calling them Tail FK Control. Do this for each bone in the chain. Next, we're going to hook them up. The way that we do this is by parenting the IK bones to the FK controls instead of the root. First, go into edit mode. Then, verify that the first bone is parented to root. Then, select the first IK bone. Shift-click on its corresponding FK bone, hit Ctrl-P, and select Keep Offset. Do this for each IK bone in the tail. And that's it. That's the whole rig done. This should be all you need to animate your snake characters however you need to. If you want, you can create a UI to make it easier to use, but plenty of other people have already made videos on that, so I'm going to leave it here. I hope you found this helpful. If you make anything with this rig, please @ me on Twitter or in the Discord. I'd love to see what you make with it. Good luck on your projects, and thanks for watching.